Hey guys, Level Cap here. Today we're going to talk about tanks in Battlefield 1 and whether or not they are in fact overpowered. Now, one thing for sure is that tanks are significantly more effective than they were in previous Battlefield games. It's not necessarily to say that tanks are better than they were in previous Battlefield games, as tanks in Battlefield 4 were significantly faster, their shots didn't drop as much, they were generally speaking easier to use. However, the amount of counters that infantry have available to them in Battlefield 1 has gone down significantly compared to Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3, so tanks for the most part have had far less that they need to worry about. In fact, at this point I've gone on at least 4 or 5 flawless tank rounds, not to mention more rounds where I might have died a few times as infantry, then got into a tank and never died for the rest of the game. And it's gotten to a point where I'm in fact actually kind of bored of playing in the tanks because of how good they are. I just don't feel like I'm really being challenged to absolutely wreck everybody on the battlefield. Now, there's been a huge amount of debate on Reddit as to whether or not tanks are overpowered, or some people liking that they're overpowered, other people not liking that they're overpowered. I've seen a lot of posts from people saying that they've never really played in vehicles much, but they get into a light tank and they absolutely own, and some people are saying that they've had flawless rounds in light tanks and they've never really used tanks in Battlefield before. And it really got me to focus a bit more on the light tank itself, as the other tanks are good, but they require a bit more teamwork and a bit more strategy to do well with. The landship is a lot of fun to use, but having 2 gunners plus the driver is really the optimal way to run that tank, and even then it's a little bit vulnerable on its backside. Whereas the light tank has the 360-degree rotating turret. It's only got 1 person in it, so there doesn't have to be any coordination between driver and gunner or repairing or anything like that. And then of course the biggest culprit, and the thing that I think needs the most balancing, is the secondary shot on this thing, which is just basically a canister shot that works kind of like a shotgun, except it can long range infantry from like 100 feet away and one-shot them. It is incredibly powerful, and it's what I get most of my kills with, and I think DICE really needs to severely reduce the damage on this thing just to bring it in line. If you've ever tried the alternate loadouts on the light tank, they're simply not as effective. Some of them are geared more towards infantry. The howitzer one has a crazy powerful cannon for close range and a machine gun for secondary fire, but they don't feel quite as overpowered as the standard loadout of the light tank. So I feel like a weapon balance would certainly be in line for this tank. Now, another thing that kind of came to mind was the fact that the other tanks rely heavily on teamwork. The heavy tank can be soloed pretty effectively, but the landship for the most part is really only going to be effective if you've got some good gunners in there. The light tank, however, doesn't require any teamwork, yet to kill a light tank you need a huge amount of team coordination. Matimi and I were playing the other day and there was a good light tank driver on the enemy team. We kept trying to sneak up on him with the assaulter class. We couldn't get close enough to use our anti-tank grenades, and the amount of time it took to set up the AT rocket gun to shoot him from range, he was able to kill us with his canister shot or his normal shot. And so even with 2 players working together, a good light tank driver can easily thwart you. So you need a huge amount of teamwork to actually take down these tanks, and a bit of luck or luring them into locations that are a little bit too close quarters for them to be able to deal with you, or you can get your anti-tank grenades. It's very difficult though, and I think the biggest problem is that people are saying they take out light tanks by themselves if they really try. Well, I can kill a bad light tank driver, but once you run into a medium skilled or even a highly skilled light tank driver, it becomes a whole other story, and you need a huge amount of teamwork to take down just 1 person. And I think that's part of the balance issue, is the other tanks function better when you have good teamwork with them, but the light tank is purely a solo vehicle that needs a huge amount of teamwork in order to finally take down. And I think that's where we're seeing a big part of the imbalance here. Now, this little light tank is most similar to what tanks were like in previous Battlefield games, although from many respects it is better, considering that you do not have to get out of this vehicle to repair it, so you never have to make yourself vulnerable. I think DICE's main strategy behind this was to try and prevent people from stealing tanks while you're repairing it, as that was a big thing in previous Battlefield games. However, what I really liked about Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 is that a good tank tank team would have the secondary gunner get out to repair the tank, so you didn't have to worry about it getting stolen, and that was teamwork there. You had to work together with somebody else to get your tank repped well, or you could even run into engineers just on the battlefield and they might rep your tank, and there's a cool bit of teamwork there. And if you had to get out of your tank to try and rep it yourself, well, that was because you weren't really working together as a team, and if you got your tank stolen because of that, then it kind of served you right at that point. So objectively speaking, tanks have really become less about teamwork than they were in previous games, and considering that DICE is trying to make taking out tanks such a big team effort, it seems kind of weird that they've taken out keeping tanks alive a team effort as well. You could argue that they're actually making the game less team oriented than it was before. Now, aside from nerfing the canister shell, which I think will go a long way to trying to bring this tank in line, we could try something else that makes the tank a bit more team oriented. Now, the real FT-17 light tank from World War I was not a one-man tank. It was actually a two-man tank, a driver and then a gunner. Splitting up this tank into both a driver and a gunner would make it much more team oriented, and you would have to have good communication, or at least two good skilled players that knew how to work together in order to be effective with this vehicle. Just like the other two tanks require high levels of teamwork to be as effective as they can be, having two players in the light tank would make them more effective. Now, of course, you could still try and solo it, driving it to a location and switching to the turret to deal damage to enemies, and I feel like the tank would still be fairly effective in this manner, but using two players, it would be the most effective. And I think this could be a really interesting change-up, forcing most of the tanks in the game to require some degree of teamwork in order for them to be at their full potential. Now, I realize at this point in the game, changing a one-man vehicle into a two-man vehicle is not necessarily that realistic from a design standpoint, and it would be significantly easier just to nerf some of the weapons on this tank. And like I said before, the canister shell is probably one of the most effective weapon nerfs you could give this tank. Another good nerf would be changing out the primary cannon for something with a little bit less splash damage, so it's not as effective against infantry at range, and then also potentially changing its drop-off distance. It currently shoots pretty straight and accurately even at range, and so reducing that range a little bit would make this tank a little bit more of a close quarters weapon, or something that just couldn't obliterate infantry at pretty much all ranges. And I think bringing the tanks a little bit more in line engagement distance wise would be a good balancing point to start with, because that's how infantry have been balanced in Battlefield 1. Why not balance the tanks that way as well? Now, aside from absolutely dominating people on the battlefield, just killing left, right, and center with very little to stop me, I also noticed that I was getting a huge amount of points for things other than just killing infantry. Obviously, getting on capture points during a game of Conquest is worth a lot of points, and that was fairly easy to do, as you just kind of roll up your tank, kill everybody there, and then stay on the captured point. It was significantly easier to get flag caps as a tank driver than it was as infantry. So I'm sort of sharing along in all of the PTFO points that all the other infantry are getting as well. So my score wasn't really reduced by being in sort of a slow, lumbering tank. In addition to that, for whatever reason, DICE decided to add in kill streak bonus points. Now, this to me I think is a bit of a mistake, as it kind of inspires poor choices in terms of PTFO decisions, because if I'm getting a huge amount of kill streak points, I don't really want to end my kill streak. But if the team needs me to maybe sacrifice myself or my tank by pushing it onto point, distracting the enemy, pulling a Hail Mary play, I'm going to be less inclined to try and make that play, because I don't want to die and I don't want to lose my kill streak. Now, the kill streak points themselves are worth a huge amount of points. Basically, every kill you get without dying increases the kill streak bonus you get by 10 points. So if you kill, say, 5 people, that 5th person is going to be worth an extra 50 points. The 6th person, an extra 60. By the time you're on 30 kills without having died, you're getting a bonus of 300 points per kill. This isn't just a bonus overall for that one kill streak. You're getting that much every time you kill a player, so your scoreboard just goes through the roof. And I'm not really sure why DICE implemented this again, as obviously kill streaks benefit people in tanks or using the hero classes the most, so it's sort of like a rich gets richer type score system. And in my opinion, I think this is a really bad decision, and I think they should remove the kill streak bonus entirely, or maybe just give it to certain vehicles or certain situations where people are less inclined to play or get as many points, like maybe aircraft or flying the bomber. If you get a lot of kills in the bomber, I could see kill streaks being a valuable way to try and reward people flying the bigger, heavier, less likely to survive aircraft around the map versus the tanks, which are the easiest things to use in the game, get the most kills. Why should they also be getting more points for it? Anyway, I think tanks and the scoring system need a lot of balancing in this game before it feels good and well balanced. Personally, I think it would be fine to have tanks being very powerful and like very scary to see on the battlefield. I think that's a good idea, but I also think they should require a lot of teamwork in order to be very powerful. You shouldn't just randomly spawn into a tank and be able to top the scoreboard just because you got such a powerful battlefield pickup. A lot of people have made this sort of Battlefront comparison in the sense that whatever pickup you get on the battlefield itself, it'll dictate how high you are on the scoreboard. And currently I do have to agree with some of those comparisons in that if you get some of the hero classes right now or some of the tanks, it's just sort of an easy top of the scoreboard if you know what you're doing. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about tank balance in the comments. Be constructive and respectful of other people and their opinions. DICE is definitely looking at what our feedback is, and the better, more constructive feedback we can give them, the better this game will be. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.